Good morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. I'm your moderator, John Becker, and I want you to focus on a few numbers as we get our conversation started this morning. It is focused on Knoxville and housing, and this website really gives you a picture of it. This is run by the City of Knoxville, the University of Tennessee, and other partners, and you can see just at the top here, 5,400 people housed since 2020. That's where you can find the number of homeless, stabilized, housed, and at risk. This is available 24/7. And as we scroll down, I want to bust some myths. 4 out of the 5 people helped across the city are local. There aren't a lot of people rolling in from other places that need help in Knoxville. These are our friends and neighbors. And this is something I really want you to focus on. When we asked the perception of events here, what led you into homelessness? As the managers of this site, look at how much blue here is and look at what it says. These are the people who cannot find affordable housing, and these are the other reasons. They're in jail or they have legal problems. They cannot find affordable housing. Let's take that full and let you soak those numbers in and the perspective from that graphic. Again, run by the City of Knoxville and its housing leaders, and we are pleased this morning to have 2 of them with us, 2 directors, Aaron Reed and Kevin DeBose. Thank you both for being here as a part of this important conversation.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce our panel, then we'll get started. On the end there is Don Bosch. He's a Democrat, runs his own law firm.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. And Eddie Smith is a Republican, and he used to be a state lawmaker. Eddie, always good to see you.
Good morning, John. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. My colleague John North with us as well.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. Let's start with both of you and your roles, what you walk in the door doing every day. Ms. Reed, let's start with you.
Thank you. I'm the executive director of the Knox County Office of Housing Stability. So that's a joint office of the city and the county. I come to work every day thinking about how we can reduce homelessness across the city and the county, how we can use federal, state, and local funds in a coordinated and effective way to accomplish that goal.
Director DeBose, how about you?
Yes, I direct the Office of Housing and Neighborhoods, and I get up every morning trying to increase the inventory of housing across the board, but particularly affordable housing.
And let's start with you because we are seeing some great gains with the city in terms of affordable housing. What can you tell our viewers we looked at like before those efforts and what we look like now?
Yeah, so, you know, our situation was caused by a supply and demand, and we had a big deficit in terms of housing units. And so we drafted a housing strategy last year, and our bold goal was to produce 6,000 to 8,000 new units by 2029. We're on pace to do that.
And if you can do that, what is that going to mean in terms of people across this community? Will we see fewer people who are homeless, or does this help targeted people in certain income levels?
No, we want to help anyone. You know, our plan is attainable, resilient Knoxville, and so at each level we had a deficit. And so, it's a kitchen table issue for all of Knoxvillians, whether you're in the situation yourself or you have a neighbor or a kid or a grandchild, it affects all of us. So we need to impact the entire market.
One more question to you, Director Reed, before I open it up to our panel. Let's talk about where we stand in terms of the number of people who are homeless. I think in any given day, you say you help close to 1,900 people facing that reality.
That's correct, but that number's actually grown. The HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System website that you just highlighted, which I really appreciate, they just updated the data for the 4th quarter of last year, and that number is up to 2,300. So
what does that tell you?
On an average day in Knoxville and Knox County, we have 2,300 people accessing homeless services. That is up from 1,000 people in 2018. So that shows you how quick the rise has been over the past 7 years.
And is there anything that you can point to in particular, or is it a combination of variables?
Really the biggest thing, by far, the biggest factor is housing. and deteriorating affordability, which everyone in this community has noticed.
Aaron, from the homelessness perspective, can you help us to sort of visualize or understand, do you all have specific annual goals for creating supportive housing for the homeless, or what's the plan to sort of reduce that number of 2,300?
So the Office of Housing Stability is working on a strategic plan right now. We've done multiple public listening sessions over the course of the winter. We've conducted nearly 100 interviews with people who are currently homeless or who have been homeless. We're going to be conducting strategy sessions with local service providers and experts to help shape that plan, and that plan is going to be coming out in late spring. I can give you a little bit of a preview about what some of the goals are going to be.
Let's make some news.
Love that.
So there's been a lot of discussion in the community about trying to reach what's called functional zero for one particular subpopulation of homeless individuals, whether that's veterans, whether that's youth ages 18 to 24. And functional zero can be easily misunderstood. People think it means that there is no one who is homeless, but that's not actually what it means. What it means is that you have fewer people coming into the homeless services system than are leaving it housed. And so you're housing more people than the number who are becoming homeless.
You're ahead of the flow, if you will.
Exactly, because any homeless services system is going to be about inflow and outflow. We're always going to have people flowing into that system. Our job is to make sure we have streamlined and efficient programs to get them out of that system and housed in a sustainable way.
So Aaron, two things of interest to me, and I think our viewers as well. One, how do you funnel the homeless population into your programs to ultimately get them into permanent housing, wherever that may be? How does that happen?
That is a great question. So the Homeless Management Information System is part of that. HMIS is a central data system that includes client-level data. Most of our homeless service providers utilize this system, and they also utilize a part of it called coordinated entry. So coordinated entry is where homeless service providers put in client-level data. Other providers can see that data. What that helps us do is a whole lot of things. One, let's say it helps us avoid duplication of labor. If someone has a case manager at one provider, and then they go see another provider because they have a need and that provider's just right there, well, that provider can look in the system and say, you have a case manager. Why don't we call your case manager over at this other provider? So it really helps us be effective and utilize our resources for people who are not already covered.
We've got to take a quick breakdown, but I'll let you have that follow-up, and then we'll get Eddie in on the conversation as well. We hope you stay with us on Inside Tennessee, talking about a critical issue for our city, and that is housing in Knoxville. We're back right after this. We're back on Inside Tennessee with two housing experts with the city of Knoxville. Don?
Aaron, one last question about the homeless population and services. One of the complaints that you hear sometimes in the downtown population is that it seems like everything is centralized for the homeless population downtown, whether it's temporary shelters, services, warming stations. Is there any look at trying to diversify that through the city and county? And is that something that your office is doing, particularly since you're one of the few hybrid offices, both with city and county together, my long failed effort at consolidated government?
There is a lot of discussion about how we diversify the placement of homeless services. There are certain advantages, certain economies of scale that you can reach by having services centralized in one place, but what anyone who has gotten off at an interstate exit anywhere west of downtown knows, we also have homeless encampments and homeless individuals.
That's right.
Everywhere throughout the city and the county at this point. And so there are lots of discussions about diversifying where we are putting homeless services. I will say that we want to be especially sensitive to community feedback, neighborhood feedback in terms of placing services. And so that is always a long and difficult conversation.
And Aaron, I want to get you both in on this one, because when we talk about it, people hear homeless and affordable housing, and they lump it all into just kind of one bucket. But really, when we talk about homeless, we're talking about the homeless camps that you see along the street, but also there's that population of homeless that aren't actually living in encampments. They may be living in a friend's house. They can't afford the housing, and how that dovetails into the diversification of affordable housing from Section 8 to all the way up to just making it easier from the missing middle that we've done with the city of Knoxville, all of those strategies kind of going into play between both of your offices?
Well, so when I say there are 2,300 people accessing homeless services on an average day, it includes people who are on the street. It includes people who are in transitional housing or homeless shelters. And so definitely we do not have 2,300 people on the street. My estimate for how many people we have on the street is at least 400, because that's about the number that we served on our busiest night at warming centers this past winter, or this current winter. But it's probably at least a couple hundred more than that, 600 to 700 people on the street or in encampments. So the other situations that you're talking about, people who are doubled up in apartments or staying on friends' couches, those individuals are actually not included in that total of 2,300, because if they are staying in someone else's apartment, if they are doubled up, according to federal guidelines, they do not count as homeless, even though they are very, very housing unstable.
Director DeVos, I know that we have a challenge in our community because housing prices have just soared so much in Knoxville. I looked at the last median income, median home price for the city of Knoxville is $420,000 a year. A teacher can't afford that. A firefighter can't afford that.
Cop can't.
Cop can't. It's a real challenge. Let's talk about why building more helps everyone of all income levels. Why do you say that?
Yeah, well, you know, what has been happening over the past 5 years, we grew by 10,600 persons in 5 years. To put that in perspective, we went 40 years and grew by 4,000 people. In the period between 1990 and 2005, by only 1,800 persons. So this is a big change. And so what was happening is that people who could afford to pay more in rent or buy more house were competing with those who were lower income. And so our inventory needed to increase at all points. And so, you know, we had a particular focus on the affordable end because we needed to protect those who were in need of vouchers, who couldn't find places to use those vouchers, but also with our policies make it easier to build across the board.
There are specific targets that you all are sort of aiming for when it comes to units. Can you talk a little about that?
Oh yes, so we want to, you know, our bold goal is to build 6,000 to 8,000 new housing units by 2029. That's 1,200 to 1,600 per year. We're at 1,450 for 2024, so we're sort of on pace. And all of the administration's policies are sort of helping to build that. And we're seeing more construction, more building permits being pulled, and so we ultimately believe that the private market will solve this problem, but we have a couple more years to progress to get to our goal.
Real quick, sorry, just clarify for me, are we talking that's just the city of Knoxville, or is that city and county?
So, you know, our Attainable Resilient Knoxville plan is for the city only, and the county has other strategies for the unincorporated area.
Both are very focused on density, though. Can you explain that for people who hear that and worry that 75-unit apartment complex is going to come be constructed next to them? There are a lot of fears that I just want you to dispel. Yeah, so, you know, we believe in gentle density where appropriate, and the middle housing initiative is starting in those areas that are what are called traditional neighborhoods, pre-1940 neighborhoods prior to the automobile being common in every household. Those were walkable communities. What has happened in those areas, because of disinvestment, there are a lot of vacant lots, a lot of underutilized, ill-defined areas that have the potential to, you know, help us solve this crisis. And so the gentle density is really rebuilding those areas. You know, the traditional single family, low density neighborhood, right now, you know, policies aren't impacting those areas, so to speak. All right, we appreciate it. I've got to take a quick break and we'll be back. Don, you can weigh in right after this on Inside Tennessee. In the next few weeks and months and years, housing is going to be at the top of every political conversation. Two experts with the city of Knoxville with us this morning. We're glad you're here, Don.
Kevin, by the way, nice 20-year anniversary for us. We were in the same Leadership Knoxville class in 2004.
Best class ever.
Best class ever, that's right.
Yeah.
But my question to you is, when we talk about housing and the city's initiatives, are we talking about largely constructing rental units or units for rent? Or are there units for purchase, whether they be freestanding or condominium type units? Is the city focusing on that as well?
Yeah, in this season right now, because of the inventory deficit that we had, it's largely been to incentivize the rental development. And, we're starting to go into a new season. The interest rates for home purchases is a driver in that. And frankly, the interest rates have made it impossible for a large segment of our population to purchase at this time. But there are still things we can do, from a public standpoint to really pump that market with new housing. And so the focus to date has been on rental units across the board.
And since you've been in this industry, how have you seen the change or the shift from purchase to rental? How much has it increased on your watch?
Yeah, so Knoxville traditionally has been one of the most affordable markets.
That's right.
And it changed in a short period of time, and so I'm in the city, and I'm used to the close-in neighborhoods, and so I'm seeing properties triple in value in the last 10 years, and so it's good on one hand to have that investment in your city, but also it's making it less affordable to persons that historically have been affordable for.
And one of the things that we saw, everybody calls it the U-Haul index, that Tennessee continues to be a place that they're moving to. So looking in your crystal ball, I know you've got the 6,000 plus units you want to get on by 2029. We don't see the growth slowing down. It may be stabilizing some, not the 10,000 pace that we were at. But are we going, what are the policies going to be able to keep up with that going into the future once this current administration starts to sunset as a new one looks to take over?
Yeah, in our plan, we have projections going out to, another 20 years. And right now at this point, we're about 200,000 in population in the city. And we feel like it's going to grow to about 216 over the next 20, which is a 541 person per year growth. Now that's a slowdown from what we've been experiencing, but a lot of our growth has been attributed to the growth of the University of Tennessee.
That's 300 new units you need probably for 550 people.
Yes, it is. And so, we have to really focus on the new growth that's going to happen, new folks coming here, but also the existing needs that we have in this community.
Director Reed, when it comes to talking about people who need a home, who are homeless, living on the streets, what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions about who that is in our city?
So there are lots of misconceptions that substance misuse and mental illness are the main drivers of homelessness. They are definitely the minor drivers, and also in some cases the consequences of homelessness. The major driver, of course, is housing, lack of housing. So our homeless population includes over 250 families with minor children. It includes nearly 250 youth between the ages of 18 and 24. It includes a lot of seniors who have been priced out of their housing. And it also includes a lot of single individual people who are by themselves, very little in the way of social support, who need an affordable place where they can live. But I would say that the biggest misconception is really that substance misuse and mental illness are the big drivers. We do see that a lot. About 40% of people who are homeless here in Knox County and Knoxville report that they have a mental illness. About 20% report a substance use disorder. About a third report a physical disability. And in the interviews we've been doing with people who are currently homeless under the bridge and in the warming centers, we see a lot of physical disability, a lot of people who've had amputations, a lot of people who've had strokes or Parkinson's. It is very, very common in the homeless population.
One of the common conversations we had was about permanent supportive housing in the last decade, where you look at Minvilla Manor, and there was a lot made about the expense of putting that in, the expense of continuing to help people get a job and reduce their substance abuse and hopefully end that as a part of that supportive housing. Is that still a primary goal of the cities, or where does that issue stand?
So permanent supportive housing is a very necessary part of the solution. We do have a permanent supportive housing facility coming online this summer, Callahan Flats. It's much needed. I'm expecting to see a significant drop in chronic homelessness as a result of that one development coming online. It's a good thing for our community. Permanent supportive housing is really only appropriate for a small percentage of our homeless population. That's people who are chronically homeless, which is they've been homeless longer than a year and they have a disabling condition.
And that's how many people would you say right now in Knoxville?
About 300 that we know of. That's an undercount.
What's one thing you want people to take away from this conversation today? I'll give that to both of you in the last minute we have.
Let's be ready to see each other as neighbors instead of obstacles.
Director?
Things are getting better. You know, speaking of permanent supportive housing, 254 units have been added in the last 5 years under this administration, and 2,600 new units of affordable housing have been added. You know, so you think about what is being done across the board, and then what we're doing from an affordable housing, it's really a game changer.
We appreciate the conversation with both of you. Thanks for making time.
Thank you.
We're back with our talk around right after this. Back with our talk around, let's move to some political news this week. Senator Hagerty says he's going to run again for the Senate. Eddie, what'd you make of that announcement?
Not unsurprising. I mean, with the discussion of Marcia potentially running for governor, you know, I think it's wise because he will then be the senior senator in D.C.
But he was supposedly going to get a Trump gig. That didn't happen.
You know, I think everybody was trying to read the tea leaves before all of that. And, you know, honestly, I'm glad that Senator Hagerty is where he is because he's actually able to lead in the Senate more than he would be somewhere else in the administration.
Don, what do you say from the Democrat side? Who do you think will run against him in 2026?
I don't think we've identified a candidate yet. I know that the party is out looking. We've just had changes in leadership with the state party and local parties. So I think they're trying to cultivate a candidate. It's an uphill battle, but you've got to fight the battle. So that remains to be seen, I think, in my opinion.
Does he see a primary challenge on the Republican side?
He could. I could very easily see Senator Hagerty getting primaried either to his hard right or somebody more moderate. I would not be surprised by that. I think the Democratic field to be pretty narrow, one or two maybe, and hopefully we can get somebody with some experience and some clout. There are a few people floating around whose names are being mentioned.
Well, I was going to say, I think anybody that comes in against Hagerty for the Senate, or, you know, just look at the field that's lining up. Trump's going to come in and endorse Hagerty. He'll endorse Marcia. So I think anybody trying to run to their right is going to run into a Trump problem.
Hagerty also still may get tapped when there become openings in Trump's administration. And we may have another seat to fill if Marcia, in fact, does run for governor and resign.
We've done some reporting about the impact of the cuts that the Trump administration is proposing and doing in terms of the federal workforce. The Smokies being a concern. Is there anything, John, in the reporting you think our viewers should understand about what we're seeing at the federal level and how it may trickle down to East Tennessee?
Well, there's probably a lot that hasn't come up yet because it's almost been day by day that we've had revelations or concerns about, like, grants to support programs that are administered through our universities in the state of Tennessee. That's a big one. We've talked about that here ourselves. I think there's a lot that still hasn't manifested itself.
I think a lot of people that voted for him because he thought he was going to bring the price of groceries down are not going to be able to afford any groceries because they might be out of work.
We appreciate you watching Inside Tennessee. We'll see you back